In January 1947, Los Angeles became the stage for one of the most infamous unsolved murders in American history. Elizabeth Short, a 22-year-old aspiring actress, was discovered brutally murdered in a vacant lot in the Leimert Park neighborhood. Her body had been cut in half at the waist, drained of blood, and positioned with eerie precision, leaving investigators horrified by the professionalism of the mutilation. The crime scene showed no trace of blood, which meant the murder had been carried out elsewhere and the body carefully transported. This disturbing detail shocked the city and immediately made headlines across the nation. Elizabeth quickly earned the nickname, the Black Dahlia, a moniker inspired by her dark hair, fashion sense, and the noir film culture of the time. She was portrayed by newspapers as a mysterious beauty with glamorous ambitions to make it big in Hollywood. Yet behind the sensationalism was a young woman struggling to survive, often moving between cheap hotels or staying with friends. She was known to be charming and friendly, yet her lifestyle left her vulnerable. Media outlets capitalized on her image, turning her into both a victim and an icon of danger. Police officers, stunned by the brutality, launched one of the largest investigations the Los Angeles Police Department had ever undertaken. Detectives began piecing together her life, interviewing acquaintances, friends, and the many men she had known. Almost immediately, the case became a media circus, with headlines sensationalizing every detail. Reporters dug into her past, speculating about secret relationships and hidden motives. Letters and phone calls flooded police stations with supposed tips and false confessions. Some individuals even stepped forward claiming responsibility, though none could be verified. Investigators struggled with the lack of physical evidence, as fingerprints and forensic science were far less advanced in 1947. Meanwhile, the image of Elizabeth's lifeless, mutilated body haunted both the detectives and the public. Newspapers plastered her photographs across front pages, emphasizing her tragic beauty. The nickname, Black Dahlia, stuck, cementing her as a symbol of Los Angeles' dark underbelly. Hollywood, known as the City of Dreams, was suddenly seen as a city of nightmares. Even seasoned detectives admitted they had never seen anything like this before. The public demanded answers, but the mystery only deepened with each passing day. Elizabeth's murder was no longer just a local tragedy, it had become a national obsession. The official investigation began with a focus on Elizabeth's last known movements. Witnesses placed her in downtown Los Angeles the night before her death, moving between restaurants and bars. The last confirmed sighting was at a cafe, where she was seen with an unidentified man. Detectives immediately began scrutinizing the many men who had crossed paths with her, from soldiers to businessmen to would-be Hollywood producers. More than 150 suspects were questioned in the early days, but none provided a solid lead. The media, hungry for every scrap of information, pressured police to deliver answers. Newspapers ran sensational theories, suggesting motives ranging from jealous lovers to serial killers. Some stories painted Elizabeth as a femme fatale, while others portrayed her as a tragic dreamer who fell victim to Hollywood's dark side. Police collected scraps of evidence, including tire tracks near the crime scene and fragments of carpet fibers. Then, a shocking twist. A package arrived at a local newspaper office, containing Elizabeth's belongings, her birth certificate, social security card, photographs, and personal letters. The package was meticulously cleaned with gasoline, erasing any usable fingerprints. Investigators realized they were dealing with a killer who wanted attention and control. Profilers suggested the murderer was intelligent, calculating, and possibly trained in medicine or anatomy. False witnesses began emerging daily, adding noise and confusion to the case. Detectives worked around the clock, but the trail seemed to vanish into thin air. Some suspects included doctors, actors, and even police officers, yet no arrests followed. The brutality of the crime drew comparisons to horror films, making Elizabeth's murder a grim reflection of post-war Los Angeles. Critics accused the LAPD of incompetence, saying they mishandled evidence and lost crucial leads. Others believed the case was deliberately covered up because of ties to powerful figures. The Black Dahlia became more than a murder mystery, it became a cultural phenomenon, exposing the shadows lurking beneath Hollywood's glamour. The public's fascination only grew as the investigation dragged on. Ordinary citizens speculated endlessly about the identity of the killer. Detectives admitted privately that the case might never be solved. Each passing day made the mystery deeper, the truth more elusive, and the fear more pervasive. The legend of the Black Dahlia was born, forever etching Elizabeth Short's name into American crime history. As days turned into weeks, the investigation into Elizabeth Short's murder became the largest manhunt Los Angeles had ever seen. Detectives canvassed neighborhoods, questioned hundreds of residents, and tracked Elizabeth's movements across multiple cities. They discovered she had spent time in San Diego shortly before her death, staying with an Air Force sergeant and his family. She had left San Diego on January 9, reportedly heading back to Los Angeles to meet someone. Police theorized that whoever she was meeting could have been her killer. Dozens of leads were pursued, from former boyfriends to suspicious strangers who were seen near the vacant lot. Each suspect was interrogated and their alibis meticulously checked. Among the most notable suspects were several doctors who had medical training and lived near the crime scene. The clean, surgical nature of the cuts on her body suggested knowledge of anatomy, leading police to focus on medical professionals. Investigators also looked at butchers, morticians, and military personnel with similar skills. Despite these efforts, every lead ended in disappointment. The media continued to fan the flames, printing lurid details and speculative headlines. The public became obsessed, with amateur sleuths writing letters to the police offering theories. Some citizens even visited the crime scene, which had become a grim tourist attraction. Meanwhile, detectives faced growing frustration as pressure mounted from City Hall and the public. LAPD brought in experts to analyze the crime scene photographs, looking for overlooked details. Psychiatrists were consulted to build a profile of the killer, describing him as methodical, possibly sadistic, and craving attention. Reporters compared the case to noir fiction, calling it a real-life Hollywood murder mystery. Rumors spread that Elizabeth had been involved with powerful men, including producers and politicians, adding a possible scandalous angle. Some believed the case was intentionally being suppressed to protect reputations. Theories multiplied, but hard evidence remained scarce. The city of Los Angeles was gripped by fear, convinced that a dangerous, highly intelligent murderer was still at large. Each day, newspapers ran fresh angles, keeping the case on the front page. The Black Dahlia became a symbol of lost innocence, a chilling reminder that even a young woman chasing her dreams could meet such a grim fate. In late January 1947, just weeks after the murder, the killer struck again, at least in spirit, by sending another letter to the press. This time, it was a typewritten note mocking the police and promising more killings if they failed to catch him. The letter was signed, Black Dahlia Avenger, solidifying the name that the press had already given the case. Detectives feared they were dealing with a killer who enjoyed playing games. The LAPD dedicated even more manpower to the case, combing through psychiatric records, criminal files, and even investigating known sadists and violent offenders. Meanwhile, the coroner's report confirmed the gruesome details of the murder. Elizabeth had been beaten severely before her death, then her mouth had been cut into a grotesque, Glasgow smile. The precision of the mutilation suggested the killer had taken time and care, indicating this was not a crime of passion but a premeditated act. Detectives theorized the murderer might have kept her alive for some time before killing her, given the signs of prolonged torture. This theory horrified the public and fueled even more sensational media coverage. Hollywood studios became nervous, as Elizabeth had occasionally been seen with aspiring actors and minor industry figures. The possibility that someone from the entertainment world might be involved added a sinister edge to the story. Police questioned dozens of men from the film industry, but no arrests were made. Some officers believed the killer was taunting them because he felt untouchable. The LAPD offered rewards for information leading to an arrest, but false leads and prank calls overwhelmed the tip lines. As weeks turned into months, the trail grew colder. Public frustration mounted as headlines began accusing the police of incompetence. Editorials demanded answers, calling the investigation a disgrace. Detectives worked tirelessly, even under heavy scrutiny, determined to bring justice to Elizabeth Short. Still, each promising suspect ended up being cleared. Some officers privately worried the case might never be solved. The Black Dahlia mystery became a stain on the LAPD's reputation, something that haunted detectives for decades. Despite the lack of progress, the case refused to fade from public memory. Instead, it grew into a legend, its details retold and reimagined with every passing year. By early 1947, the investigation into Elizabeth Short's murder had become a labyrinth of dead ends, conflicting witness statements, and sensationalized rumors. Detectives began examining everyone in Elizabeth's circle, from friends to casual acquaintances, trying to trace her final days. One of the first men scrutinized was Dr. George Hodel, a physician with a questionable past and proximity to Elizabeth's last known whereabouts. His home and habits were investigated thoroughly, as some believed his medical knowledge could explain the surgical precision of the mutilation. Officers searched his property and questioned neighbors, but no conclusive evidence was found. Meanwhile, the LAPD continued to receive a flood of letters from self-proclaimed killers, further complicating the case. Some of these letters included details that only someone close to the crime could have known, but most turned out to be hoaxes. Investigators combed through criminal records, looking for men with violent tendencies, sexual deviancy, or a history of sadistic behavior. Every lead seemed to end in disappointment, leaving detectives frustrated and exhausted. The media continued to amplify the story, portraying Elizabeth as both a tragic victim and a glamorous figure caught in a dangerous world. Public interest was insatiable, with ordinary citizens following every new clue or rumor obsessively. Some theorists suggested that Elizabeth's death was not random but targeted, perhaps linked to her efforts to break into Hollywood. Others speculated that she had been involved with someone dangerous, a secret lover or a powerful man seeking to hide a scandal. As the investigation dragged on, detectives began building psychological profiles, describing the killer as meticulous, controlling, and possibly harboring deep-seated rage toward women. Neighbors near the crime scene recalled seeing suspicious vehicles and unfamiliar men, adding to the list of potential suspects. Police examined the typewriter used in threatening letters sent to newspapers, hoping to match it to a suspect. The city remained on edge, fearful that the killer could strike again. Crime scene photographs and autopsy reports were analyzed repeatedly for overlooked details. Detectives traveled across Los Angeles County to interview anyone with possible knowledge of Elizabeth's movements. Even distant relatives and former classmates were questioned in search of hidden motives or grudges. Despite exhaustive efforts, no solid leads emerged. The lack of witnesses at the scene made it almost impossible to trace the murder. Public fascination turned into obsession, with everyone speculating about the identity of the Black Dahlia killer. The LAPD faced mounting pressure to close the case, but the killer's meticulous planning kept him beyond reach. Elizabeth's story became a cautionary tale, illustrating the dark side of a city glittering with dreams. The legend of the Black Dahlia only grew as the investigation failed to provide answers. Throughout 1947, dozens of suspects emerged, each investigated with painstaking care, yet none led to an arrest. Law enforcement explored nearly every angle, from rejected suitors to mentally unstable men with a fascination for violence. One particularly prominent suspect was Leslie Dillon, a mortuary assistant whose interest in Elizabeth's murder raised suspicion. Police interrogated him extensively, examining inconsistencies in his story and his knowledge of anatomy. Other leads involved former boyfriends who were known to have volatile tempers. Detectives also investigated men connected to the film industry, as Elizabeth had briefly socialized in Hollywood circles. Reports suggested she had met a variety of men claiming to help her career, some of whom were questioned thoroughly. Every suspect seemed to have an alibi, or evidence could not be tied to the crime. The LAPD pored over letters sent to newspapers, analyzing handwriting, phrasing, and typewriter patterns. Some messages included morbid threats, seemingly designed to taunt both the public and the police. Officers even explored the possibility that the killer was an obsessive fan, someone who had followed Elizabeth for months. Psychologists began constructing detailed profiles, hypothesizing that the murderer was likely a man with medical knowledge, organized tendencies, and deep hostility toward women. Some experts suggested he had personality disorders that fueled both cruelty and cunning. Every lead, no matter how promising, ultimately fizzled, leaving detectives frustrated and haunted by unanswered questions. Elizabeth's friends and relatives were interviewed repeatedly, hoping someone might recall overlooked details. Even distant acquaintances were scrutinized for potential motives or connections to the crime. Neighborhood residents were questioned about unusual activity near the vacant lot where her body was discovered. Media attention continued to shape the investigation, both helping and hindering law enforcement. Public pressure was immense, as citizens demanded justice while the killer remained free. Some investigators privately feared that the murderer might never be caught. Newspapers printed vivid reconstructions of the crime, which only amplified public fear. Rumors swirled about potential conspiracies to protect influential individuals. Each day, detectives revisited evidence, hoping a small clue would finally break the case open. The Black Dahlia murder became a symbol of Hollywood's dark underworld. Elizabeth's tragic story resonated with a nation fascinated by crime and the dangers of urban life. Despite exhaustive investigation, the killer remained unidentified, and the case continued to grow in legend. Every failure to solve the crime deepened the sense of mystery surrounding Elizabeth Short's death. By the spring of 1947, the investigation into Elizabeth Short's murder had reached an almost fevered pitch. Detectives had interviewed hundreds of people, scoured hotels, cafes, and bars she frequented, and retraced her steps across Los Angeles. Her life had been fragmented, moving between apartments, acquaintances' homes, and cheap hotels, which complicated the investigation. Police examined every man she had contact with in the weeks leading up to her death. They also interviewed waiters, taxi drivers, and anyone who might have seen her after she left San Diego. Rumors of Hollywood connections swirled, but nothing concrete emerged. In late March, a reporter received a letter claiming inside knowledge of the murder. The letter described details that had not been publicly released, suggesting the writer might be the killer. Detectives analyzed handwriting, word choice, and tone, but could not confirm authenticity. Meanwhile, local citizens reported suspicious behavior, including men lingering near vacant lots. Some reports proved to be false, others too vague to act upon. Police also examined the typewritten notes sent to newspapers, comparing them to known suspects' typewriters. Investigators considered that the killer may have taken pleasure in manipulating the press. Public fascination intensified, with readers following each new article obsessively. Letters claiming responsibility continued to arrive, some signed Black Dahlia Avenger, or other variations. Some letters contained cryptic symbols, while others were boastful confessions. Law enforcement worked tirelessly to verify the information, knowing hoaxes were common. The city was gripped by fear, with women advised to avoid walking alone at night. Detectives revisited forensic evidence repeatedly, hoping a clue had been overlooked. Forensic science in 1947 was primitive, making it difficult to extract fingerprints or other traces. Yet officers persisted, determined to find a suspect. The public pressure grew unbearable for the LAPD, as criticism mounted in newspapers and city council meetings. The case became an obsession, not only for law enforcement but for ordinary citizens eager to solve the mystery. Each week brought fresh speculation, theories, and rumors that only deepened the sense of unease. The Black Dahlia was no longer just Elizabeth Short, it had become a symbol of danger and intrigue in Los Angeles. By mid-1947, the investigation began to explore more sinister possibilities, including connections to organized crime or other serial offenses. Detectives revisited old cases, looking for similarities in method, motive, or victim profile. They investigated several murders of women in Southern California, hoping to identify patterns. Some law enforcement officials suggested that the killer might have medical training, while others suspected a skilled butcher or mortician. Profilers hypothesized that the murderer was meticulous, highly organized, and possibly obsessed with control. Police also explored Elizabeth's acquaintances in Hollywood, looking for men with both access and opportunity. Rumors spread that she may have been involved with multiple influential men, some of whom may have had reasons to silence her. Investigators examined every hotel, boarding house, and restaurant she had visited, searching for overlooked clues. Some citizens came forward with letters, photographs, and personal belongings, hoping to aid the investigation. Others sought attention, claiming knowledge of the crime, which frustrated detectives. Handwriting experts were consulted to analyze letters sent to newspapers, looking for matches with suspects. Law enforcement also considered that the killer was taunting both the public and the police through letters. As the months passed, the trail grew colder, with no definitive leads emerging. The press sensationalized every development, contributing to widespread fear. The public speculated endlessly about the killer's identity, with theories ranging from vengeful ex-lovers to criminal masterminds. The LAPD's frustration increased as every suspect was cleared one by one. Elizabeth's tragic story continued to dominate headlines and captivate the imagination of the nation. Psychologists offered profiles suggesting the killer might be socially adept yet emotionally detached. Some detectives privately feared that the crime would never be solved. Citizens began to link unrelated crimes, convinced the Black Dahlia might be part of a broader killing spree. Investigators worked tirelessly, retracing Elizabeth's final steps multiple times. Each clue was analyzed, each tip followed, yet no arrests were made. Fear, obsession, and fascination gripped Los Angeles, making the case a constant topic of conversation. Over time, Elizabeth Short became both a victim and an icon of post-war Los Angeles' darker side. The city itself seemed transformed, haunted by a killer who remained frustratingly invisible. Even decades later, the Black Dahlia case would remain one of the most enigmatic and compelling mysteries in American criminal history. By late 1947, the Black Dahlia case had grown into a national sensation, dominating newspapers and radio broadcasts across the United States. Letters from self-proclaimed killers flooded both the LAPD and local newspapers, some containing gruesome details meant to intimidate or confuse. Detectives analyzed every word, searching for clues, but most were hoaxes designed to gain notoriety. Reporters, meanwhile, capitalized on the public's fascination, publishing lurid accounts of Elizabeth Short's life and death. Headlines often exaggerated facts, portraying her as a darkly glamorous femme fatale instead of a young woman with dreams of Hollywood stardom. Public interest surged, and amateur sleuths began sending tips, theory notes, and even photographs claiming relevance to the case. Police struggled to separate legitimate leads from distractions, which slowed the investigation. Elizabeth's family endured constant scrutiny, their grief magnified by sensational reporting. Investigators continued examining suspects with medical knowledge, including doctors, morticians, and surgeons, but none were ever linked definitively to the crime. They studied crime scene photos repeatedly, searching for overlooked details that might reveal the killer's identity. Each week, new witnesses came forward, sometimes adding valuable insight, sometimes creating confusion. Detectives reviewed hotel logs, cab receipts, and personal letters in hopes of tracing Elizabeth's final movements. Psychologists offered behavioral profiles suggesting a calculated, controlling individual with possible sexual sadism. The press reported extensively on these profiles, fueling public speculation. People began theorizing that the killer was someone within Hollywood, using access and influence to evade capture. As the city absorbed the shock of Elizabeth's murder, public fear escalated, especially among young women traveling alone at night. Law enforcement meetings became tense, as detectives argued over suspects, evidence interpretation, and media strategy. Public pressure grew daily, demanding justice for the young woman whose death had captivated a nation. Police began coordinating with other departments in California, looking for possible links to other unsolved murders. Each new tip was pursued, yet often ended in frustration and disappointment. The killer remained invisible, his identity unknown, and his motives a chilling mystery. The Black Dahlia became both a personal tragedy and a cultural obsession. Newspapers printed photographs of Elizabeth, fueling fascination and speculation about her private life. Despite relentless efforts, the trail remained cold, leaving the city haunted by fear, curiosity, and obsession. Even decades later, the case would inspire books, films, and endless theories about who had committed such a horrific crime. Throughout 1948, the investigation into Elizabeth Short's murder continued, but progress remained painfully slow. Detectives examined hundreds of men, revisiting prior leads and questioning anyone connected to Elizabeth's life. Some of the most persistent suspects were those with medical or anatomical expertise, yet evidence was always circumstantial. Police consulted handwriting experts to analyze threatening letters sent to newspapers, hoping to match them to a known individual. Many letters were dismissed as hoaxes, though a few contained intimate details only someone close to the crime could have known. Public interest remained high, and the media ensured the story never faded from headlines. Each new article brought fresh speculation, fueling the city's obsession with the Black Dahlia mystery. Some reports suggested Elizabeth may have been lured by someone she trusted, possibly a man with connections in Hollywood. Investigators explored this theory thoroughly, interviewing friends, acquaintances, and former lovers. Police also considered the possibility of a serial offender, comparing details to other unsolved murders in the region. Forensic methods were limited in 1948, making it difficult to extract conclusive evidence from the crime scene. Yet detectives reviewed autopsy photos, notes, and photographs repeatedly, hoping something had been missed. Psychologists constructed detailed profiles, suggesting a meticulous, calculating killer who possibly harbored deep anger toward women. Detectives examined crime scene patterns, victimology, and behavioral clues to develop leads. Rumors of wealthy or influential suspects complicated the investigation, as some believed justice might be obstructed. Citizens sent dozens of anonymous tips, hoping to solve the case, while others sought attention by falsely claiming knowledge. The city remained tense, with women walking in groups and avoiding deserted streets. Police coordinated across departments, exchanging files and theories, yet no arrests were made. Elizabeth's family continued to suffer under public scrutiny and media sensationalism. Each passing day without resolution intensified fear and speculation. Detectives revisited each suspect multiple times, hoping for confessions or new evidence. Law enforcement debated theories but often disagreed on which leads were credible. The Black Dahlia case became a cautionary tale about ambition, vulnerability, and the darkness hidden beneath Los Angeles' glamour. Even as months turned to years, the murder remained unsolved. The story of Elizabeth Short transformed into legend, haunting the collective imagination of both Los Angeles and the nation. As 1948 unfolded, the LAPD continued to focus on Dr. George Hodel, a wealthy physician with an eccentric reputation and a history of questionable behavior. Hodel lived in a lavish home in Los Angeles, and rumors suggested he might have been involved in the murder due to his proximity to Elizabeth's last known whereabouts. Detectives examined his medical practice, looking for connections to anatomical knowledge that could explain the surgical precision of Elizabeth's mutilation. Neighbors were questioned about his behavior, and police scrutinized his associates for any hints of involvement. Hodel became a recurring figure in the investigation, with some officers privately suspecting he had a dark obsession with women. Letters and newspaper clippings were found in his home, though none could be definitively linked to the Black Dahlia case. Meanwhile, the press continued to sensationalize every possible lead, casting suspicion on multiple men across Los Angeles. Detectives interviewed former employees, friends, and acquaintances, trying to establish a timeline for Hodel's movements during January 1947. Despite intense scrutiny, there was never enough evidence to charge him, though he remained a person of interest for decades. Other suspects were also investigated, including small-time criminals, transient men, and those with known violent tendencies. The LAPD even revisited cab drivers, hotel clerks, and restaurant workers who might have seen Elizabeth during her final days. Each theory was analyzed meticulously, but the lack of concrete forensic evidence made progress nearly impossible. Police examined typewritten notes sent to newspapers, hoping to match them to typewriters in Hodel's possession, but the trail went cold. Letters sent to the press continued to arrive, some containing accurate details, others intended to mislead. Investigators theorized that the killer might have had a fascination with publicity and media attention. Public fear and obsession grew alongside the investigation, with citizens speculating endlessly about the identity of the murderer. The Black Dahlia case became more than a crime. It became a cultural touchstone, a symbol of both glamour and horror in post-war Los Angeles. Friends and relatives of Elizabeth were repeatedly questioned, sometimes pressured by the intense media coverage. Every new tip sparked hope, only to end in disappointment, leaving detectives frustrated and exhausted. The brutality of the crime, combined with the public's obsession, made solving the case a near-impossible challenge. Psychologists continued to develop profiles, describing a killer who was intelligent, organized, and sadistic. Letters to the press suggested someone enjoying the attention and chaos caused by the investigation. The city remained on edge, with women and men alike fearing the presence of a predator in seemingly ordinary places. Even decades later, Hodel's name would remain linked to theories surrounding the Black Dahlia murder. Analysts debated whether attention, sadistic pleasure, or some deeper psychological compulsion motivated his actions. Survivors' insights became critical, but forensic limitations hindered definitive identification. Public safety campaigns emphasized vigilance, traveling in groups, and avoiding isolated areas. Despite exhaustive efforts, the Zodiac's identity remained hidden, and his mythos grew with every unsolved crime. His communications blurred the lines between criminality and psychological warfare, leaving communities and authorities in perpetual fear. In the late 1940s, Los Angeles remained captivated by the mystery of Elizabeth Short's murder, while the LAPD faced constant scrutiny over its inability to solve the case. Public fascination transformed the young woman into a cultural symbol, her story retold with morbid fascination in newspapers, magazines, and radio broadcasts. Detectives combed through every piece of evidence, from the crime scene photos to the personal letters Elizabeth had carried. They interviewed dozens of potential suspects, many with medical, military, or anatomical backgrounds. Each lead, no matter how promising, seemed to fizzle, leaving the investigation stuck in a frustrating loop. Rumors proliferated, suggesting that the killer had connections in Hollywood or law enforcement. Some suspected organized crime, while others believed the murderer acted alone out of obsession or rage. The letters sent to newspapers became a central focus, as detectives tried to trace handwriting, tone, and content to specific individuals. Many were dismissed as hoaxes, yet a few contained details that could not be publicly known. Investigators also examined Elizabeth's social circle, exploring friends, acquaintances, and former lovers for possible motives. Hotel clerks, taxi drivers, and waitstaff were interviewed multiple times, recounting every interaction with the young woman. Psychologists offered behavioral profiles, describing a calculated and meticulous killer, possibly with sexual sadism. Citizens wrote letters offering theories, tips, and confessions, creating an overwhelming influx of information for detectives to process. Each tip had to be carefully validated, a painstaking process that stretched resources thin. Media attention remained intense, often overshadowing investigative work with sensational stories. The city became obsessed, with discussions of the Black Dahlia dominating public spaces, from bars to offices to family homes. Detectives felt immense pressure, knowing that every misstep would be scrutinized. Meanwhile, Elizabeth's family endured endless questions and public attention, prolonging their grief. Over time, the murder came to symbolize the darker side of Los Angeles, contrasting sharply with the city's glamorous image. The combination of brutality, mystery, and media fascination ensured that the case would remain in the public imagination. Each passing day reinforced the sense that the killer might never be caught. The lack of forensic technology in 1947-48 made the case exceptionally difficult to solve. Letters, witness statements, and circumstantial evidence became the primary tools for detectives. Even decades later, the Black Dahlia case would remain a cautionary tale about obsession, violence, and the fragility of life in a city of dreams. By 1949, the Black Dahlia case had become one of the most infamous unsolved murders in American history, drawing attention from across the country. Newspapers relentlessly covered every detail, from the gruesome crime scene to Elizabeth Short's glamorous aspirations. Public fascination created a flood of amateur sleuths, letters, and theories, some insightful but most misleading. Detectives continued re-interviewing suspects and witnesses, hoping time would reveal overlooked clues. Dr. George Hodel remained under intense scrutiny, but no concrete evidence tied him to the murder. Police explored other men connected to Elizabeth's life, including transient acquaintances and former boyfriends. Hotel clerks and cab drivers were questioned multiple times, as investigators attempted to reconstruct her final hours. Forensic limitations frustrated the LAPD, making fingerprints, fibers, and blood analysis rudimentary at best. Letters sent to newspapers were analyzed for handwriting, phrasing, and content to identify the sender. Psychologists continued constructing profiles, describing a calculated and organized killer with deep-seated anger toward women. Some suspects were eliminated through alibis, while others remained shadowy figures in the investigation. The city was gripped by fear, and women were warned against walking alone at night. Media accounts often exaggerated Elizabeth's life, fueling sensational theories about her relationships and motives. Rumors of Hollywood connections persisted, with suggestions that influential men might be involved. Detectives considered that the killer could be a loner obsessed with attention and notoriety. Each new letter, tip, or sighting was carefully scrutinized for credibility. Some letters were clearly hoaxes, yet a few contained intimate details suggesting knowledge of the crime. The police faced pressure from both the public and the media to produce results. Elizabeth's family endured constant scrutiny, their grief magnified by sensational reporting. As the years passed, the case became a symbol of Los Angeles' dark underbelly. Citizens speculated endlessly about the killer's identity and motive. Detectives debated theories, from organized crime involvement to psychological obsession. Every effort to trace the killer's movements or habits seemed to hit a dead end. Despite exhaustive investigation, no one was ever charged. The legend of the Black Dahlia grew, intertwining tragedy, mystery, and public obsession. In the early 1950s, the LAPD faced criticism for failing to solve the Black Dahlia case, and the murder continued to haunt both detectives and the public. Journalists revisited every detail, publishing retrospective accounts and interviews with former investigators. Each re-examination sparked renewed interest in potential suspects and theories. Dr. George Hodel's name resurfaced repeatedly in books and articles, further cementing his association with the crime. Detectives continued searching through old case files, sometimes uncovering new evidence overlooked in earlier investigations. Handwriting analysis of the letters remained inconclusive, leaving authorities frustrated and without a clear path forward. The media sensationalized Elizabeth's life, portraying her as a tragic figure whose dreams of Hollywood stardom ended in horror. Some theories suggested the killer was a medical professional, a butcher, or a mortician, each hypothesis analyzed carefully but ultimately unprovable. Amateur detectives, obsessed with the case, wrote letters and books attempting to solve the mystery. Police examined these tips, often finding them unhelpful or fraudulent. The public continued to speculate, linking unrelated crimes to the Black Dahlia to suggest a serial offender. Elizabeth's family lived under constant public scrutiny, their grief made worse by relentless media coverage. Detectives revisited each known associate, hoping memory or overlooked details would reveal the killer. Psychological profiles suggested someone organized, intelligent, and with a pathological need for control. Letters sent to newspapers hinted at the killer enjoying the media attention, further complicating the investigation. Even minor details, such as hotel receipts or cab records, were painstakingly examined. Witnesses' memories were re-interviewed, though years of time made recollection difficult. Despite exhaustive efforts, no evidence ever definitively linked anyone to the crime. Rumors and speculation fueled a growing mythology surrounding the Black Dahlia, blurring fact and fiction. Books, radio shows, and later television programs revisited the case, keeping it alive in the public consciousness. Detectives privately feared the case might never be solved, haunted by the brutal, precise nature of the murder. Every new tip or theory was analyzed, yet the case remained cold. The combination of public obsession, media frenzy, and lack of physical evidence ensured that Elizabeth Short's murder would remain a mystery. Even decades later, the Black Dahlia continued to captivate the imagination of those fascinated by unsolved crimes. The case symbolized the dark side of Hollywood and post-war Los Angeles, where dreams and danger often collided. By the mid-1950s, the Black Dahlia case had become a symbol of Los Angeles' darkest mysteries, with no new leads emerging and public fascination continuing unabated. Detectives were still reviewing old files, hoping that technological advances or overlooked details might provide breakthroughs. Letters to the press and police continued, some clearly hoaxes, others containing unsettling information that could not be verified. The police began analyzing patterns in the letters, searching for clues about the author's location, habits, and psychology. Media outlets sensationalized every development, with newspapers publishing lurid articles about Elizabeth's personal life, alleged relationships, and supposed enemies. Rumors persisted about the killer being someone in Hollywood, a man with influence, charm, and access to Elizabeth. Detectives focused on men in her life, but each lead failed to produce concrete evidence. Friends and acquaintances were re-interviewed, though memories had faded over time. Psychologists offered updated profiles, describing a meticulous and obsessive individual, likely harboring deep-seated anger toward women. Every hoax letter and false tip added layers of confusion, frustrating investigators and fueling the public's obsession. Police considered that the killer might have had prior experience with corpses, possibly in a medical or mortuary setting. Some investigators privately believed Dr. George Hodel remained a strong suspect, given his expertise, proximity, and suspicious behavior. Others explored more distant suspects, including transient men, criminals, and those with violent pasts. Hotel clerks, taxi drivers, and restaurant workers were repeatedly questioned about Elizabeth's last movements. Media coverage turned tragic curiosity into a citywide obsession, with residents following every article and theory. Letters continued to arrive, some confessing, others threatening more crimes, and some merely seeking fame. Detectives revisited evidence, including photographs, autopsy notes, and crime scene sketches, hoping a detail had been overlooked. Every tip was examined, regardless of credibility, as police remained desperate for any clue. The case grew colder with each passing year, yet the LAPD refused to close it without resolution. Citizens speculated endlessly, theorizing serial killers, conspiracies, and Hollywood scandals. Books and articles continued to dissect Elizabeth Short's life, analyzing her behavior, ambitions, and relationships. Her murder remained an unsolved enigma, captivating readers and investigators alike. The combination of brutality, mystery, and media obsession ensured that the case would endure in public memory. The Black Dahlia became a symbol of obsession, tragedy, and the dangers lurking beneath the city's glamorous surface. Despite decades of investigation, the killer remained unidentified, and justice for Elizabeth Short remained elusive. By the late 1950s, the LAPD faced growing criticism for failing to solve the Black Dahlia case, and the public obsession showed no signs of waning. Detectives continued re-examining old leads, suspects, and evidence, hoping to uncover missed connections or overlooked clues. Some letters sent to newspapers contained intimate details, hinting that the writer was closely connected to the crime, though none could be definitively traced. Journalists continued sensationalizing Elizabeth's life and death, often exaggerating her relationships and lifestyle to attract readers. Rumors circulated that the killer might be a medical professional, mortician, or someone with specialized anatomical knowledge. Police continued interviewing former friends, acquaintances, and distant relatives, attempting to reconstruct her final movements. Each new tip was painstakingly analyzed, though most proved unreliable. Psychologists updated profiles, describing a calculating, obsessive, and methodical murderer. Detectives also considered potential connections to other unsolved murders, analyzing patterns and timing. Hotel and cab records were repeatedly reviewed, as police searched for anomalies or discrepancies in Elizabeth's movements. The press fueled public fear and fascination, keeping the story alive across newspapers, radio, and emerging television coverage. Citizens were obsessed, discussing the case in public spaces and speculating endlessly about suspects. Hoax confessions became increasingly common, further complicating the investigation. Detectives privately feared that the killer may have been long dead or untraceable, adding urgency to any new lead. Even decades later, the Black Dahlia would remain a central case study in criminal investigation and profiling. Investigators revisited the typewritten letters, hoping advances in analysis might provide new insight. Rumors about Hollywood connections persisted, though no evidence ever confirmed these claims. Each passing year seemed to deepen the mystery, as investigators and the public alike struggled to find closure. The case became a benchmark for unsolved murders, representing both the limitations of forensic science and the complexities of human obsession. Citizens remained captivated by Elizabeth's story, transforming her from a victim into a cultural icon. Detectives debated whether the killer had acted alone or had accomplices. Letters, tips, and media attention continued to create a chaotic information landscape for investigators. Each theory, from jealous lovers to serial killers to professional criminals, was explored but ultimately dismissed. The Black Dahlia story blended fact and fiction, legend and reality, in a way few crimes ever had. Investigators recognized that the case was as much a social phenomenon as a criminal investigation. Los Angeles itself was transformed, forever marked by the brutal murder of Elizabeth Short. The Black Dahlia case became immortalized as a cautionary tale about fame, obsession, and the darkness lurking in human nature. By the 1960s, the Black Dahlia murder had grown from a shocking headline into a full-blown cultural legend, inspiring books, articles, and films exploring the mysterious case. Detectives who had worked on the original investigation were aging, some retired, and others still haunted by the inability to find Elizabeth Short's killer. Police files were meticulously preserved, with every tip, letter, and photograph archived in the hopes that a future breakthrough might occur. Dr. George Hodel, once a peripheral suspect, gained renewed attention, particularly after former associates suggested his eccentric and secretive behavior could be linked to the crime. Investigators examined his medical background, lifestyle, and proximity to Elizabeth, but concrete evidence was still elusive. Media attention remained intense, with newspapers revisiting the story every few years, keeping public fascination alive. Amateur sleuths and private investigators delved into old files, proposing new suspects and theories. Some suggested Elizabeth had been targeted by organized crime, while others speculated about a serial killer with an obsession for fame and attention. Letters sent to newspapers in earlier years were reanalyzed, looking for clues previously overlooked. Psychologists updated behavioral profiles, attempting to understand the mind of a meticulous and calculating murderer. Public fascination only grew as the case became a symbol of Hollywood's dark underbelly. Books chronicled Elizabeth's life, emphasizing her dreams, ambitions, and the vulnerability that made her a target. Police revisited former witnesses, hoping that time had revealed new memories or previously concealed information. Media coverage highlighted bizarre coincidences, unverified sightings, and potential copycat crimes. Some investigators explored whether the killer had connections to other high-profile murders in Los Angeles. Hotel logs, cab receipts, and personal correspondence were examined repeatedly. Citizens remained obsessed with the case, discussing it in social clubs, classrooms, and public forums. The Black Dahlia became a reference point for true crime, inspiring both fascination and fear. Investigators occasionally received tips from people claiming insider knowledge, but few proved credible. The combination of brutality, mystery, and media frenzy ensured that the case's legend continued to grow. Law enforcement recognized that every misstep or overlooked clue could haunt them forever. Even decades later, Dr. Hodel's name would remain intertwined with theories about Elizabeth Short's death. The story captured the imagination of writers, filmmakers, and ordinary citizens alike. The city of Los Angeles itself seemed changed, haunted by an unsolved murder that epitomized both glamour and horror. The Black Dahlia case had transcended crime, becoming a haunting myth in American culture. During the late 1960s, renewed interest in the Black Dahlia case emerged as investigative techniques slowly improved and the public remained fascinated. Detectives revisited cold files, hoping that advances in profiling, forensic science, and evidence analysis could provide new leads. Amateur investigators and true crime enthusiasts continued studying the case, examining photographs, letters, and reports for overlooked details. Dr. George Hodel remained a central figure in many theories, as his behavior, medical expertise, and proximity to the crime scene seemed suspicious to some researchers. The LAPD analyzed his alibis and movements during the time of Elizabeth's murder, but no definitive evidence linked him to the crime. Other suspects from earlier investigations were revisited, including acquaintances, transient men, and individuals with violent histories. Letters sent to the press decades earlier were scrutinized once again for handwriting analysis, phrasing, and potential forensic value. Psychologists continued building behavioral profiles, suggesting a meticulous, calculating individual with obsessive tendencies. Media coverage of the case remained intense, with newspapers and television programs revisiting the story and keeping public attention alive. The legend of the Black Dahlia expanded, blurring the lines between fact, fiction, and cultural mythology. Citizens continued speculating about motives, suspects, and possible conspiracies. Some theorists suggested that Elizabeth had been targeted because of her ambition and proximity to influential men. Others focused on the precision of the mutilation, implying that the killer had extensive anatomical knowledge. The case became a benchmark in criminal profiling, studied by law enforcement and psychologists alike. Police examined cold tips, witness statements, and every scrap of evidence collected in the original investigation. The public's obsession fueled renewed interest in books, documentaries, and magazine articles. Rumors about Hollywood connections persisted, adding intrigue and scandal to the narrative. Detectives continued to weigh every theory, from organized crime involvement to a psychologically disturbed lone killer. Each passing year without resolution added to the mythos surrounding Elizabeth Short and the Black Dahlia. Friends and family of Elizabeth remained part of the public discussion, their grief mingled with the enduring fascination of outsiders. Police occasionally followed up on new leads, but the killer remained elusive. The city of Los Angeles became synonymous with both glamour and dark crime, a reputation solidified by this unsolved murder. The Black Dahlia's story influenced generations of crime writers, filmmakers, and amateur investigators. Even decades later, the case remained one of the most chilling and intriguing unsolved murders in American history. Elizabeth Short became a symbol of lost innocence, ambition, and the dangers lurking beneath the surface of a city built on dreams. By the early 1970s, the Black Dahlia case had become legendary, studied not just by law enforcement but by journalists, historians, and true crime enthusiasts worldwide. Books, articles, and documentaries examined Elizabeth Short's life and death, often speculating about her relationships, ambitions, and the killer's motives. Detectives who had worked on the original investigation were aging, and some had retired, yet a few remained obsessed, hoping for closure. Police files were meticulously preserved, containing letters, photographs, witness statements, and forensic notes from the late 1940s. Renewed attention focused on Dr. George Hodel, whose lifestyle and medical knowledge continued to raise suspicions. Investigators analyzed his past, including associations with women, behavior patterns, and proximity to Elizabeth during her final days. Other suspects from earlier decades were revisited, including men with criminal histories, transient lifestyles, or violent tendencies. Letters sent to the press decades earlier were re-examined for handwriting patterns and cryptic clues. Psychologists updated profiles, theorizing a meticulous, obsessive, and possibly psychopathic individual who derived pleasure from attention and control. Media coverage continued to fuel public fascination, keeping Elizabeth Short's story alive and prominent. Rumors about Hollywood connections persisted, with speculation that someone influential may have been involved or complicit. Police re-interviewed surviving witnesses, hoping that memory or newly recalled details could offer leads. Amateur investigators dissected crime scene photos, autopsy reports, and old letters for overlooked clues. Each new theory, whether about motive, method, or suspect, was carefully weighed but rarely led to breakthroughs. Public obsession intensified, with readers, radio listeners, and television audiences following every speculation. The Black Dahlia became a symbol of Los Angeles' dark side, representing both glamour and horror. Police continued to explore cold leads, some decades old, hoping modern methods could reveal new evidence. Letters, confessions, and hoaxes were evaluated for authenticity and psychological insight. Citizens were captivated, analyzing details, writing letters, and debating theories across newspapers, clubs, and classrooms. Investigators remained haunted by the precision and cruelty of the murder, recognizing that the killer's expertise made him nearly impossible to trace. The legend of the Black Dahlia continued to grow, blending reality, rumor, and cultural myth. Elizabeth Short's tragic story resonated with a nation captivated by mystery and crime. Even as time passed, the case remained unresolved, a chilling reminder of human darkness. The city of Los Angeles remained forever associated with both dreams and danger. The Black Dahlia would endure as one of the most enigmatic and haunting unsolved crimes in American history. By the mid-1970s, the Black Dahlia case had cemented its place in American true crime history, studied by criminologists, journalists, and aspiring detectives alike. Law enforcement continued reviewing cold files, hoping advances in forensics, including fingerprint analysis and trace evidence techniques, might provide breakthroughs. Dr. George Hodel remained a focal point of attention, as some investigators and authors argued his behavior and skills matched the profile of the killer. Others revisited alternate suspects, examining men with violent tendencies, criminal histories, or links to Elizabeth Short's social circle. Letters sent to newspapers decades earlier were reanalyzed, searching for clues in phrasing, handwriting, and typewritten characteristics. Psychologists continued refining profiles, suggesting a methodical, organized killer obsessed with control and media attention. Media coverage remained intense, with newspapers, radio, and television revisiting the story to attract audiences fascinated by true crime. Public interest had not waned, with amateur sleuths exploring theories, writing books, and analyzing old photographs and documents. Rumors persisted that the killer was connected to Hollywood or other influential figures, though evidence never substantiated these claims. Investigators examined crime scene photos, autopsy reports, and letters repeatedly, searching for overlooked details. Each new theory or tip was carefully scrutinized, though most proved inconclusive. Citizens remained captivated, discussing motives, suspects, and potential cover-ups. Police were particularly frustrated by hoax letters and false confessions, which muddied the investigation. The combination of brutality, mystery, and media frenzy ensured that the Black Dahlia legend continued to grow. Detectives continued to study old evidence, hoping modern methods could finally reveal the truth. Books and documentaries explored Elizabeth Short's life, her ambitions, and the terrifying circumstances of her death. Even decades later, her murder was cited as a benchmark for unsolved crimes and criminal profiling. Every passing year reminded investigators and the public of the case's enduring enigma. Friends and family of Elizabeth remained part of the discussion, though her death had long become part of the city's collective consciousness. The Black Dahlia became more than a murder. It became a cultural touchstone for obsession, tragedy, and mystery. Each letter, witness account, or tip held the potential for revelation, yet decades passed without resolution. The city of Los Angeles itself became inseparable from the story, a symbol of both ambition and danger. Public fascination ensured that Elizabeth Short's memory and the haunting details of her murder would never be forgotten. The legend of the Black Dahlia became immortalized in American culture, influencing crime literature, media, and true crime fascination. Even generations later, the story of Elizabeth Short would continue to inspire fear, curiosity, and obsession. The murder's brutality, combined with the killer's elusiveness, guaranteed that the case would remain one of the most haunting mysteries in history. By the 1980s, the Black Dahlia case had become a legendary unsolved crime, studied in criminal psychology classes and referenced in true crime literature worldwide. Advances in forensic science offered new hope for detectives, who revisited old evidence in search of fingerprints, fibers, or DNA traces. Police and private investigators re-examined letters sent to newspapers decades earlier, hoping that new handwriting and forensic analysis techniques could reveal the author. Dr. George Hodel remained a central figure in many theories, particularly due to his medical expertise, proximity to Elizabeth Short, and pattern of suspicious behavior. Investigators also reviewed suspects from earlier decades, including transient men, criminals with violent histories, and individuals connected to Elizabeth socially or professionally. Each lead was painstakingly examined, though no definitive evidence was ever found. Psychologists constructed detailed profiles of the potential killer, describing someone organized, obsessive, and capable of meticulous planning. The media continued to fuel public fascination, with books, magazines, and documentaries exploring every detail of Elizabeth's life and death. Amateur sleuths and true crime enthusiasts dissected photographs, autopsy reports, and letters for clues previously overlooked. Rumors persisted that the murderer was connected to Hollywood or influential circles, though no evidence substantiated these claims. Police reviewed crime scene photos, sketches, and autopsy notes repeatedly, searching for inconsistencies or previously unnoticed details. Witnesses, friends, and distant acquaintances were interviewed again, even decades later, in the hope of recalling new information. Letters, tips, and hoax confessions created a chaotic flow of information, challenging investigators to separate fact from fiction. Public obsession remained intense, with Elizabeth Short's story continually revisited in media and popular culture. Detectives were haunted by the brutality of the murder and the precision of the mutilation, recognizing the killer's skill and cold calculation. The city of Los Angeles became synonymous with both glamour and danger, its identity forever linked to the Black Dahlia. Every passing year without resolution only deepened the sense of mystery surrounding the case. The legend grew, blending reality, rumor, and cultural mythology. Books and films revisited Elizabeth's life, her ambitions, and the dark circumstances of her death. Police and private investigators continued to hope for new leads that could finally solve the case. The case became a benchmark for criminal profiling, influencing law enforcement techniques worldwide. Citizens remained captivated, debating suspects, motives, and potential cover-ups. Even decades later, the Black Dahlia remained one of the most chilling unsolved murders in American history. Elizabeth Short became both a tragic victim and a symbol of post-war Los Angeles' darker side. The combination of fascination, brutality, and mystery ensured that the case would never be forgotten. By the 1990s, interest in the Black Dahlia case surged again as true crime culture expanded, with books, documentaries, and television specials exploring the enduring mystery. Detectives revisited old evidence with modern technology, hoping advances in forensic science, including DNA analysis, could yield results. Dr. George Hodel continued to be scrutinized by both professionals and independent investigators, as his behavior, medical knowledge, and proximity to the crime aligned with psychological profiles of the killer. Other suspects from the 1940s and 1950s were revisited, including transient men, criminals, and acquaintances of Elizabeth Short. Letters sent to newspapers decades earlier were analyzed with new forensic methods, searching for clues in handwriting, phrasing, and typewritten patterns. Psychologists constructed and refined behavioral profiles, describing a methodical, meticulous, and obsessive murderer. Media coverage intensified, with journalists, authors, and filmmakers examining the case in detail for public consumption. Amateur sleuths and true crime enthusiasts dissected every photograph, letter, and document available, hoping to uncover hidden truths. Rumors persisted about connections to Hollywood or influential individuals, fueling speculation and public fascination. Police repeatedly reviewed crime scene photographs, sketches, and autopsy reports, searching for overlooked evidence or inconsistencies. Witnesses and acquaintances were contacted again, even decades after Elizabeth's murder, in the hope that memories could provide new insights. Hoax confessions, false leads, and sensationalized reports complicated the investigation, making it challenging to identify credible information. The brutality and precision of the murder continued to baffle investigators, highlighting the killer's apparent skill and planning. Citizens remained captivated, discussing theories, motives, and suspects in both public and private forums. The story of Elizabeth Short became a cultural touchstone, symbolizing the dark side of Hollywood and post-war Los Angeles. Police continued to hope that technological advancements could finally solve the decades-old mystery. Each year without resolution reinforced the case's legend, drawing continued media and public attention. Books, documentaries, and television specials kept Elizabeth's story alive in popular culture. Detectives and criminologists studied the case for insights into profiling, serial offenders, and unsolved crimes. Letters, tips, and archival evidence were continually re-examined, as investigators pursued every potential clue. The city itself seemed haunted by the unsolved murder, with Elizabeth's story embedded in its cultural identity. Public fascination and speculation transformed the case into a complex mixture of fact, rumor, and legend. The Black Dahlia became a cautionary tale, highlighting vulnerability, ambition, and the dangers lurking beneath glamour. Even decades later, the case remained one of the most notorious unsolved murders in the United States. Elizabeth Short's memory persisted, both as a victim and as an enduring symbol of mystery. The story's combination of obsession, media frenzy, and brutal crime ensured its place in criminal history. Elizabeth Short, known to history as the Black Dahlia, was a young woman whose dreams of Hollywood stardom were tragically cut short. Her life ended in one of the most brutal and meticulously executed murders of the 20th century, a crime that shocked Los Angeles and captured the attention of the entire nation. Despite decades of investigation, exhaustive police work, and countless theories, the identity of her killer remains unknown, leaving an unsettling void in justice and understanding. Over the years, the case has become more than a murder investigation. It has evolved into a cultural phenomenon. Books, documentaries, films, and endless speculation have immortalized Elizabeth's story, blending fact, rumor, and legend into a chilling narrative that continues to captivate generations. From Dr. George Hodel to countless other suspects, investigators have pursued every lead, yet the mystery endures. The letters, the hoaxes, and the media frenzy all serve as reminders of the fascination, and the fear, that surrounds unsolved crimes. The Black Dahlia stands as a haunting symbol of human vulnerability, ambition, and the darkness that can lurk beneath the surface of seemingly ordinary life. Elizabeth Short's memory lives on, not only in historical records but in the imagination of all who seek to understand the unknown. Her story is a timeless cautionary tale. Some crimes may never be solved, some truths may remain forever hidden, and yet the fascination with mystery, justice, and human nature will endure. The Black Dahlia remains an eternal enigma, a life and a murder that refuse to be forgotten.